say. Now you have Pence coming out saying, "Oh, I shouldn't have certified that."
Well, that's because he was served.
Right, and that's what I'm.
Okay, so let's kind of get back into this because we have more information on that, and this comes from the congressional record. And there's the congressional record. I think I did send you a copy.
Yeah, I was.
But the actual this is an abbreviated version, but this is the congressional record of guess what date? January 6th, 2021. Shocking. And so to back it up for everybody, the Brunson brothers, Riddell, I guess his name is. He's the one who actually is on the case, but he filed in the Supreme Court. Actually, he got it in the Supreme Court, his case, which was making the 388 members of Congress put on notice that they violated their oaths of office. Not only did they violate their oath of office, but they failed to follow their responsibilities after being warned by 121 members of Congress to let them have the 10-day waiting period to go back to their states and make sure that everything is cleared up. Because Andy Biggs, this might explain a lot, Andy Biggs, the representative from Arizona, there's only 9 representative districts in Arizona, but he was one of them. And it was interesting because he stood up in the well. I think he was the first or second one to stand up and complain that everything in Arizona is out of whack, in terms of the election system.
Which he did his job.
Which he was doing. He was doing his job. In fact, I'm going to read his direct quote here in a second so that we understand that. But he was one of 121 who did that.
See, and I didn't hear about that number.
Well, yeah, that's because everybody's been trying to suppress it. And so what happened is we come along, New California State does, we come along and we file an amicus brief. Now, this is just news for everybody here, but we got this filed in. It was put in actually with the judges yesterday. So we got the confirmation on that. You can check it out on Agenda 21 Radio.news. We have the full documents and everything. You can see everything. You can see what we have here. This is our amicus brief, and you can see the actual, I copied off the actual email response or electronic response from the Supreme Court that shows that our case is in there. And this is from the Supreme Court. This is what we filed this week. Ryland J. Brunson petitioner versus Alma S. Adams et al. Respondents says motion for leave to file amicus brief for Paul Preston and the New California State as amicus curiae in support of petitioner to the Honorable John G. Roberts, Jr., Chief Justice of the United States, and of course Robert E. Thomas III as counsel. And so what we're claiming is that a couple of different things. But first of all, I want to get into a couple of things. Let me read this for the record here. It says Paul Preston, individually as president of the New California State Movement in New California State, respectfully moves for leave of court to file the accompanying amicus curiae brief in support of petitioners Ryland Brunson's petition for writ of certiorari. So what he's doing is he's asked for a judge's hearing. I think it's called a judge's hearing. That's actually, he got it. He actually got it. That's a whole different story behind the scene, how he actually got that, and for consideration that it be put to trial, but to be actually considered by judges. And of course, this is quite wide reaching, this his case, because it says that if in fact the judges confirm and they go along with what the petitioner wants, which is Brunson, that you will see 388 members of Congress, Mike Pence, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris all have to leave Washington immediately because their positions will be vacated. Now, that's a big problem. That also means that these 388 people have committed crimes because they have not upheld their oath of office. But there's more to it. And there's more to it. And that's what we brought in. We're bringing not only this petition, then I'll read this in a second, some of it that's really important, but there's history in play here, big time, that has been not noted necessarily for the record about treason and how do you get treason? What is treason? And the perception of treason. See, the perception of treason up until 1807 was that treason is when people organize an army, and the army then takes action and starts shooting and killing and doing mayhem. And then of course, you're being treasonous to the government or some value like that. It's basically it's where you got also the term two or more. So if you have two or more people that are conspiring, and it ultimately takes to action and starts killing people in a warfare or something, that's treasonous.
Right.
And of course, nobody ever thought that that would not be the case. That, in other words, they never thought that what happens if you try and stop a presidential election. You might not be using guns and violence, but you're using something different. You're using the persuasion to commit treason against your own country. You're warring against your own country in a different fashion without the so-called weapons. Weapons of words become valuable. And that's what they're talking about here. And that's what the value of the Burr thing is. So when we come back, we'll talk more about this, because this is happening right here in little old Marysville, Yuba City counties, Sutter and Yuba. It's amazing. Stay with us. You're listening to Agenda 21 Radio. And welcome back to Agenda 21 Radio. Remember to visit our website, a21r.com, newcaliforniastate.com, New California State, State of the Future. And we're talking about this Supreme Court case in which New California has come up. This is the second time we've done an amicus. And in fact, the first time we did it with Texas, went alongside Texas in its petition against Pennsylvania. And because of its situation at the voting, that was in, of course, 2020 November. But this one here now is our second amicus. And in fact, we signed, there's two more amicuses out there in regards to this, because New Illinois and New Nevada also went alongside, and it was accepted. So both of these, and all three, have been accepted now, as I understand it. So this amicus that we have here is a pretty interesting document. But one of the things that's also interesting, and I'm about to read something to you, is from the House of Representatives. And of course, the House of Representatives, this is its congressional report from, guess what, January 6, 2021. I mean, we have the whole copies. It's 100 some pages, but I broke down. I only have 2 pages here. But Robert, you've got the whole document there. Then what does it say at the very beginning? This is going back to 2021, January 6th. This is the record of that day. So what page you're looking at? The first page.
First page.
So that's for the viewers. You guys can see that. There's the first page. Go ahead.
So it's the section Office of the Clerk, House of Representative, Washington, D.C., January 5th, 2021. Honor Nancy Pelosi, Speaker, House of Representatives, Washington, D.C. Dear Madam Speaker, pursuant to the permissions granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, I have the honor to transmit a sealed envelope received from the White House on January 5th, 2021 at 5:05 p.m., said to contain a message from the President regarding additional steps addressing the threat posed by the application and other software developments or controlled by Chinese companies with the best wishes. I am sincerely Cheryl L. Johnson, Clerk of the House. So that was the first introduction.
Well, then it says addressing the threat posed by applications and other software developed or controlled by Chinese. Now, this is on January 6th, 2021, from the President. It says the Speaker pro tempore laid before the House the following message from the President of the United States, which was read and together with the accompanying papers referred to the Committee on Foreign Affairs and ordered to be printed. To the Congress of the United States, pursuant to the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Oops.
It sounds familiar.
It sounds familiar. It says the National Emergencies Act, and of course, the United States in sections 301, Title 1 of the United States Code. I hereby report that I have issued an executive order declaring additional steps to be taken concerning the national emergency with respect to the information and communications technology and services supply chain, declared in emergency order 13873 of May 15th, 2019, securing the information and communications technology and services supply chain to deal with the threat posed by applications and others. And I don't have the rest of that.
Software development or controlled by Chinese companies. The pace and preservationist of the spread in the United States of certain connected mobile and desktop applications and other software development or controlled by persons in the People's Republic of China, to include Hong Kong and I'm not sure how to say that other one, Macau. Not sure how to say that one. Macau to continue to threaten the national security, foreign policy, and economics of the United States by exercising personal election devices such as smartphones, tablets, computers. Chinese connected software applications can access and capture vast swaths of information from users, including sensitive personal identification, able information, and private information. The continuing activities of the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party to steal or otherwise obtain United States persons' data, making clear that there is an intent to use bulk data collection to advance Chinese economic and national security agenda to deal with this threat. Additional steps are required against those who developed or controls containing Chinese connected software application to protect our national security. You want me to keep reading?
Yeah, please.
The executive order prohibits certain future transactions as determined by the Secretary of Commerce involving the following Chinese connected software application: Alipay, CamScan, QQ, Wallet Share It, Tencent, QQ, VMAT, WeChat. Oh, WeChat's right there. WeChat Pay and WPS Office. The secretary is also directed to continue to evaluate Chinese connected software applications that may pose an unacceptable risk to the national security, foreign policies, or economy of the United States, and to take appropriate action in accordance with the Executive Order 13873. And this is Section 2. In consultation with the Attorney General and Director of National Intelligence, provided a report to the Assistance to the President's National Security Affairs with recommendations to prevent the sale of transfer of the United States user data to access of such data by foreign adversaries, including through the establishment of regulations and policies to identify controls and license exports of such data. I have delegated to the Secretary, in consultation with the Secretary of the Treasury and the Attorney General and the Attorney, to take such actions, including adoption, appropriation rules and regulations, and employing all other powers granted to the President by the IEEPA, as many people necessary to implement the executive order. The heads of all executive departments and agencies are directed to take all appropriate measures within the authority to implement provisions of the executive order. I am enclosing a copy of the executive order I have issued. Donald J. Trump, the White House, January 5th, 2021.
And of course, that's the order that came originally 2 years earlier that we were talking about at the time the order was out there. Okay, anyway, when we come back, we're going to talk more about this. In fact, we'll probably start the beginning of the second hour with all this. Oh, shocking. Stay with us. You're listening to Agenda 21 Radio. Because it's the right time for New California. But we got into a really interesting discussion constitutionally. And, of course, this is going into if you haven't heard, the Brunson brothers have filed a lawsuit. It's called Ryland J. Brunson Petitioner versus Alma S. Adams. And this is in the Supreme Court. And this is about two things that happened on January 6th. Now, I have here, and I'm holding it up for everybody to see, I have here the congressional record. This is, of course, the House of Representatives on January 6, 2021. And Robert Armstrong joins me in the studio. Now, Robert, you were talking about a certain thing that happened that we just kind of noticed this on the front page. Tell us what you noticed.
Well, the first thing that when we were talking about it was the whole Chinese thing was brought up. That was the first thing. And then after you read through that first page and you go down to the second page, as you continue reading the communication from the clerk of the house, I think is what it was.
So this is let's couch it. This is the opening part of the day, right?
Right.
The day is opening. They're all getting gathered together, and they're making some announcements. They have the prayer. They have the journal. It says the speaker is pro tempore pursuant to section of House Representation Resolution 8. The journal of the last day's proceedings is approved, and Pledge of Allegiance. And it says here appointment of tellers on the part of blah, blah, blah. And then the next thing, communication from the clerk of the House. And it says here's the speaker pro tempore laid before the House of Representatives, the House of the following communications from the clerk of the House of Representatives. Now, this is an interesting thing that they laid before the House, right?
Right.
So what is it?
So basically what it is basically the concerns following the Emergency Information Power
International
Act.
Emergency
That's
Information
it.
Powers Act.
I don't have
Executive Powers Act.
So that laid out the issues with China and its softwares on what basically we use in our government. And that looks like it's covering everything from bill pay to even election systems, which, as we've done our research over the years, last 2 years now, we found quite a bit of information, and it talks about tablets and everything. And what did we just recently go to in Yuba County? We went to poll pad tablets,
right,
instead of the actual poll pad books.
Right. So this is phase 2, is the tablets coming in phase 3, which would be the general election.
Right. So,
by the way, they're not connected to the internet.
They're not.
And Dominion, you lie so much.
Yep.
You guys do.
But yeah, when you walk into the county building, it pops up on your Wi-Fi.
Yeah. And of course, what I find interesting about these machines is now that they're onto the fact we know they're connected to the internet. Really, they've started hiding the machines so you can't see them.
Well, yeah, ours are locked up in a closet in the clerk's office. I know right where it's at.
Yeah,
because I ask questions.
And of course, they're not connected to the internet. They're connected to Wi-Fi.
What's funny is it says poll pad books is what it says, and then it says GC for Government Center.
Right.
So if you understand what the abbreviations in the county office are, you'll see the poll pad and it says GC for Government Center.
And of course, the poll pads are connected to the internet.
Yeah.
And of course, the Dominion machines are connected to the internet. They're left on all the time during the elections. And by the way, I forgot to tell you, they all have modems in them. In fact, it was very important to get those modems in there to make everything function properly by 2019. That was something that was a big process that was going on with Alex Padilla, who was the Secretary of State. Now he's a senator. Probably about to be returned and probably charged with treason. But I'm sort of digressing here. So this is the January 6th. This is the day of the big riot, I guess you can say, which I thought was very interesting when you start taking a look at all the January 6th things. And as you know, I was monitoring what was going on because we had some people there at the scene.
Yeah.
And we're going to come up to a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the scene, and then we'll talk about the significance of this International Emergency Executive Powers Act or order, because it is very significant. Something we didn't know until just now. Stay with us. You're listening to Agenda 21 Radio. Okay, so we're really kind of talking about something right now that was happening the very first day, January 6th, 2021, at the very first of the day. And, of course, they've come in. They've had their prayer. They've done all the things that they started off with. Then, of course, now they've gotten a communication from the White House. And Nancy Pelosi, it's in her hands. And, of course, what it is, it's addressing the threat posed by applications and other software developed or controlled by Chinese companies. Message from the President of the United States. It's shocking. A little message, Nancy, to wake you up in the morning, right? with your coffee. Take this,
Yep.
girl. And it happens to deal with the president's executive order declaring additional steps to be taken concerning the national emergency with respect to the information and communications technology and services supply chain, declared in Executive Order 13873 of May 2019, securing the information communications technology and services supply chain. And by the way, it is pursuant to the International Emergency Economic Powers Act that he signed into law in 2017 and 18. Oh, shocking. You mean maybe the president knew that in 2017 there was going to be some bad actors?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that were coming up.
That were deep and wide.
Deep, that's right. And of course, this is an Executive Powers Act that lays down a lot of restrictions on people who are, who are really out there trying to be, I guess you'd say, pander to China and get rich, and of course at the same time committing treason. We're going to talk about that. Go ahead, Robert. You were talking about the rest of that act, though.
So basically, after all that was laid out with the cam scanners, the QQ wallet, the Share-it, the VMAT, and the WeChat Pay, and WPS, I think that's WordPress. That's some type of Office suite. Anyways, so after they read through all this and they get to the end, I'll read this last section again.
Okay.
I have delegated to the secretary.
This is the president.
This is the president. I have delegated to the secretary in the consultation with the Secretary of the Treasury and the Attorneys General and the authority to take such action in concluding adoption appropriate rules and regulations and the employing all other powers granted by the president by the IEEPA as may be necessary to implement the executive order. The heads of all executive departments and agencies are directed to take all appropriate measures within the authority to implement the provisions of the executive order. I am enclosing a copy of the executive order I have issued, and then it's signed Donald J. Trump, the White House, January 5th, 2021. So after that was read, right after that was read, they call for recess. Speaker Pro Tem.
I bet they did.
Pursuant Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess until approximately 12:55 p.m. today, according to at 12 o'clock, a 6 minutes, and it's got PM. The House stood in recess, and then it goes back into the recess. But I'm thinking once they read this and they were sitting there listening to it, I think the light bulb clicked on that they're in trouble.
You bet they're in trouble. Okay, so what? Read that last part again, because this is where we want to pick it apart a little bit more. So,
and this is where I got one question for you.
Yeah, the International Executive Powers Act, IEEPA, whatever. Anyway, so this is he signed this. He had already signed this back in. See, I think what you have to do is that you had to kind of come back every 2 years. That's what it was. So in 2017, he signed it. Then he signed it in 2019 going forward. And now he's put it officially into act right here. Right now. Because
all the evidence is there.
All the evidence is there. Okay, so go ahead, read it.
So the heads of, let's see here. I lost my spot. Okay. As many be necessary to implement the executive order, the heads of all executive departments and agencies are directed to take all appropriate measures within their authority to implement the provisions of the executive order. So my question is all heads of executive departments. So that goes down back to the whole governors and all that, right?
Everybody.
And then they lay it out to the legislators, and then that goes down to the county and city.
No, that's only everybody that is in his executive circle at the federal government level.
Oh, so that's just federal government level.
Right. But it will have anything. But if you're a state and you're taking federal money, then that's going to apply to you, whatever parts of that apply to you. And I don't recall exactly the whole thing. It's a pretty big law, but it's well worth the read to read it and let everybody see it. So go ahead.
Okay. Executive order. I am enclosing a copy of the executive order I have issued, and then signed Donald J. Trump. And then, of course, we went to recess. So after recess, the recess has expired. The House was called to order the Speaker at 12 o'clock and 55 minutes p.m. Announcements by the Speaker. The Speaker, as the House comes to order for this important historic meeting, let's be remained that each side, House and Senate, Democrats and Republicans each have 11 members allowed to be present on the floor. Others may be in the gallery. This is at the guidance of the attending physician and sergeant of arms.
Okay, now there you got the COVID thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
With.
That's what.
Okay, now I'm going to interrupt here because now if you go to, I think on yours, it's page. What page is it? It's page 80. Page H80. House page 80. So Robert has the long form. I've got the short form. I just know because you know what, it's tough at 1 o'clock in the morning reading through all this stuff. Now, what we're going to do is go to, and this will answer a question about the speakership because this is all kind of folding in this next week, right? Okay, Kevin McCarthy is running around making all kinds of deals trying to be the Speaker of the House because we have 222 members of the House. So that's really up from like 183 or something like that. So did Donald Trump win? Yes. And I'm not even sure. We might do a little research here real quick and find out how many members of the Senate there are because there's some things going on there with the Senate. I saw 50-50. I thought they were winning 51-49, but I don't know. I just don't know. I was going to look at it this morning. Sorry, guys. I just didn't get around to it. But anyway, this is what's really important and we need to understand here because when I start to put it into context of our amicus, and those of you that don't know, we filed an amicus brief on behalf of myself and New California State with the Supreme Court, and they took it. And this is now going to be brought before the judges as they're to consider what's going on in the Brunson affair. And I'll talk about our amicus here in a second. But I want to talk, we're in the House. We've gone through the presentation, and now we've gone through the speeches. Now we're coming up to the speeches, and now I'm going to get into the speeches of those that were protesting the fact that they were there and they wanted to get into a 10-day period. Now, the Mike Pence could have called everything off because there were so many people protesting against the vote for the electoral votes, right? For the electors, you have to have 270 to be president. And so they were trying to call it off, saying, wait a minute, we don't want to do this. Now, this comes from Andy Biggs. Now, if you wonder why they don't want Andy Biggs to be the Speaker of the House, and everybody's complaining about Andy Biggs, we're now going to answer that question for you. Because you know what? He's got the guts, and he's going to tell it like it is, that he's got legacy issues that the other people going, well, we can't have Andy Biggs, because he brought this forward. That's what's going to happen. So the rhinos of Republicans are running from this guy. That's really what it is. Okay, so Mr. Biggs, it says Mr. Biggs, Madam Speaker, I rise in support of the objection. Now, see, he's supporting the objection. In other words, the objection that we should be sending this all back for a 10-day waiting period and then bring it back. That's what Mike Pence should declare. It says the Speaker, the gentleman from Arizona, is recognized for 5 minutes. Mr. Biggs, Madam Speaker, I join the objection to counting votes of electors from my home state of Arizona, as well as Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Nevada, because selection and election integrity is at the heart of our American constitutional republic.
This guy gets it.
Yeah, he really gets it. It says, if in a representative form of government, we must be able to trust that our elections, I'm slipping there, our elections accurately represent the will of the American voter. This is the appropriate forum anticipated and provided for by our founders to debate whether this election, excuse me, I can't get that one out of my mind now. Election complied with the Constitution that we have all sworn to protect.
Okay. And notice on their oath. He just put them on notice.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. So anyway, every particular of the Constitution is to be protected. It says, including Article 2 and Section 1, the debate as to the legitimacy of the 2020 presidential election has been suppressed by the left and its propagandists in the media until today. It says state legislatures are required to determine the manner in which electors are chosen. Arizona names its electors on the general election ballot and identifies what candidate those electors are required to vote for should that candidate obtain the majority of votes in the general election. As part of the manner for determining electors, Arizona also establishes deadlines for voter registration, and the deadline has been in place for 30 years. This is what I love, because this is what I talk about: the 29 days before the election, 29 days after. That's California, and Arizona was 26 days before and after. It says this year, that voter registration deadline was October 5th. Early voting commenced 2 days later. And 5 days before the deadline, a group filed a lawsuit demanding that Arizona election officials not enforce the deadline. It says the federal district court decided. Now, listen, they're into the courts here. This is important to understand, because where are elections set by? Who sets them? Who guides them? Who directs them? Who's in charge of them? It's the legislature. Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution. If you want to form a new state, then you have to work with the legislature concerned and then that of the Congress. They're leaving out the executive and the judiciary altogether. So it cannot go to have this thing resolved to the judges. It's not there.
And the notice of this is all there in the houses.
That's right. It says this year, that voter registration deadline was October 5th, and early voting commenced 2 days later. And 5 days before the deadline, a group filed a lawsuit demanding that Arizona election officials not enforce the deadline. The federal district court decided that since the other states have a deadline later than Arizona's, and some even allow for registration when voting, that Arizona's new deadline would be a time he chose, not the legislator's timeline. It says the appellate court effectively overturned the lower court ruling and noted that Arizona's deadline established by the state legislature was sound and appropriate and complied with the Constitution. Not the appellate court merely shortened the existing extension by the bypassing of the deadline of 10 days. The appellate court, without legal justification, also decided that everyone who registered after the legal deadline, but before the deadline created by the judicial fiat, could still vote. Okay, you see where Andy Biggs is going, wait a minute, this is the court deciding all these things. What about us as a legislature? We're the guys that are in charge. You, as the third branch of government, are not in charge. It's the legislature. That's exactly what he's saying. And he's exactly right. Well, why do you think the courts have really stayed away from these things for the most part? Because they want the legislatures to decide it. But the courts have been screwing it up. This is an action of the left. Clearly it is. This is what they try and do, is get something that's not supposed to be one of the branches, but they'll make it a part of another. That's exactly what they did in California. Yeah. You see the relationship here. It's all about usurping power from one organization, one entity to another.
Well, it goes back to what we've been saying they say Californication. Well, it's the Californication of your communists in your state following California's communists.
That's correct. That's exactly
It's not this whole moving around.
This type of usurpation legalese is a form of legal experience, I guess you can say, a legal process. That's not the right thing. And again, I had a conversation with an attorney the other day that he said he went to a certain religious law school, and then he started practicing constitutional law, and he figured out everything he learned at that religious law school
was moot.
It had nothing to do with the Constitution, and he could see how it was being applied throughout the nation, actually. Says, note that the Arizona legislature was no longer in control of determining the manner of appointing presidential electors, because the court had set a new deadline even though the appellate court found the legislator's deadline was constitutionally sound. It says during that window, listen, this
is juicy number
right here, this just eliminates the whole thing. It says during that window, more than, listen to this, 32,000 voters registered in Maricopa County alone. It says here are copies of those voter registration records. So he presents those, and going around the deadline set by the legislature, the court ignored the Arizona legislators' obligation and right to direct the manner of choosing presidential electors as set forth in Article 2, Section 1. It says, as a consequence of that judicial usurpation, more than 32,000 people were allowed to unlawfully cast ballots in Arizona's presidential election in 2020. Now, remember, Biden, by their numbers, only won Arizona with 11,000 votes. Let's be very clear here. Now, our numbers people found where these 32,000 numbers came from. And that's a whole nother story, because we can, from math, do this. It says the Arizona legislature seeks an independent audit of the election. It says the governor refuses now to call them into a special session. It says Maricopa County, a board of supervisors, has refused to comply with legislative subpoenas. In Arizona, the people who control the evidence related to the election have done everything possible to prevent the independent audit directed by the legislature. Oh. It says Arizonans have used the limited amount of records available. See, because they're not showing you the records. Now, I want to tell you something. Let's go back to San Luis Obispo County this week.
Yep.
Shocking. There's not an audit going on, but a recount going on. And election officials are doing the same thing there that they were doing in Arizona, that they're putting up walls so you can't really see the ballots that are going to go through the recount. It's a whole big drama. We read about that earlier.
And this ties to what we were saying, what we found on our canvassing with the voters not living at the address at the time they voted.
Yeah, this is the next little statement here. It says Arizonans have used the limited amount of records and available to investigate the 2020 presidential election of a limited sample, 1,000 addresses of voters. They found 538 voters did not live at the addresses on the voter rolls. And here's a stack of the declarations of affidavits supporting it. Shocking.
That's over half.
Yeah, it's over half. Shocking. It says, I object to counting the votes of Arizona electors because the federal courts went around the legislatively constructed mechanism for choosing Arizona's presidential electors, allowing tens of thousands of voters to unlawfully cast votes. The court usurped a key component of the Arizona legislature's manner of electing or selecting. And it does say selecting, doesn't it? Legislators' manner in selecting presidential electors, thus violating Article 2, Section 1. The legislature is, you see why they don't want Andy Biggs? He's a freaking constitutionalist. Are you going to tell me that McCarthy is? Oh my God. Really? They don't want the constitutionalists in there.
Call another recess after this.
Is there another recess called?
I'm looking. I don't see one. They need one. He's beating them up pretty good.
Yeah, he's really pounding on him. Says, I object to counting the votes. Says the court usurped a key component of the Arizona legislature's manner of selecting presidential electors, thus violating Article 2, Section 1. The legislature is being obstructed in its efforts, and what little evidence we have and what little information we have has produced this kind of evidence, which indicates a significant problem with the integrity of the presidential election mechanism. And he's exactly right. I mean, how do you argue with this? By the way, he's only one of 121 legislators.
Yeah, I just read where there's
121 legislators objecting to this. They are all 121. That's an outrageous number. Madam Speaker, I include in the record my written comments together with the voter registration records that reflect that 32,000 registrations permitted in contravention of state law, letters, and resolutions from Arizona legislators pertaining to the count of votes from electors, along with approximately 1,000 affidavits and declarations pertaining to the potential voter fraud in Arizona in the 2020 presidential election, and the statement of Congressman Rady Weber of Texas, which I'm not going to read right now. Okay, so you wonder why Andy Biggs is here, right? You really wonder why Andy Biggs is here doing what he's doing. Okay, now let's go further. And in the record, I think the next page for you is 91.
91? Okay.
Or 93. Sorry, we're little technical difficulties here. Kind of January. What? Yeah, H93. Okay, H93. In this record, I'll have posted up. I don't have it posted up right now, but I'll have it posted up on Agenda 21 Radio. It shows here the congressional record, and it shows the yays and nays. Now, a yay would say, yes, we want that motion to go through, and we want to put an end to this, and we want to remand it back to the states to sort the whole thing out before they took the vote. This is before Pence does anything, right? Now, Pence should have been doing something. Pence was not doing something. What he was he was playing the game with Nancy Pelosi. We know that. So now there's problems for Pence, real problems for Pence and everybody else. 388 people are named in the suit with Brunson. 388 people are named in that suit. And I don't have the front cover with me right now, but I'll see if I can get it. And it's a staggering thing to look at because guess what? Every member of the House who voted for it, and I've got the list right here. You can see this on the television, those of you who are watching right now. But there's the list, and of course, the short list of 121 voters that say yay, and then the long list of nays, 303. And 303 versus the vote of 121. Well, they went ahead and they went through the process. That's really what happened. And of course, the rest is history. But you learned something today, I think, guys, and that is that there was a lot. The president had already activated. He had already activated the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, Executive Powers Act, and that was done. So this is what I have here. I have the first page of the lawsuit. This is part of the lawsuit, and those are the names of the people that were being named here. And we have people like Adam S., Pete Aguilar, Colin Z. Allred, Mark Amadali, Kelly Armstrong, Jake Achiklos, Cynthia Anks, Don Bacon, Troy Balderson, Andy Bauer, and it goes on and on and on. All the people who voted against this. Now, there's a problem because what happens in the case of Ryland Bunsen, and again, this is the court case paperwork that he filed originally in Utah, and of course, this is at in the second judicial court or second judicial district court in Weber County, state of Utah, and this is June 21st, 2021. So the Brunsons are going after this thing now. They go through a whole series of courts to get to the Supreme Court. In the Supreme Court, just before Christmas, actually, around the 17th, I think, of December, maybe it did start in November. They really started getting proactive about putting this before the judges because, they realized that, and again, it's part of the process that it would come to the Supreme Court at this point. And so they recognized the validity of this, and they actually started speaking to the Brunsons, Lloyd Brunson in particular. And what happened was that they ultimately got enough publicity, and everybody's realizing this is not a small deal. And in fact, everybody on this list, all 388 people on this list that they put forward out there, were served by U.S. Marshals. They were served the lawsuit. They had to be served. Everybody was served. And there's another story behind that. And all of a sudden, they started to change their tunes. One of the tunes that was changed, obviously, was by Michael Pence. Now, the reason why they're changing their tunes and they're looking a little bit differently, especially people that were part of the J6 committee, because some of them are named. one of the things that they had to do was come to the realization that if they had connections to China,
Oh, this is going back to the Secretary of State and governors.
that's right. If they had connections
Pompeo.
to China and they were doing business with China, and it goes back to the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, Executive Powers Act, that Trump presented at the beginning of the whole day on the 6th. If it goes back to that, it should put a chill on them, because guess what? They could be called treasonous traitors. That is a problem. And now they know that they could be. And also, part of that, Robert, is that they violated their oath of office, which would mean that they'd have to surrender their oath of office, their office. They'd have to then pay the price for that, which is a felony, which includes jail time, which includes heavy fines. But the bigger issue is for the other one, and of course that other one that we want to talk about now is something even of a bigger problem, and that is, are they treasonous? It does look like they are. And of course, this is one of the things that they're going to get out of the Supreme Court case. And this is one of the reasons why we filed an amicus on behalf of this. And I'm going to read to you the amicus. For the most part, it's pretty simple. Paul Preston, individually as president of the New California State Movement in New California State, respectfully moves for leave of the court to file the accompanying amicus curiae brief in support of petitioners Raylan Brunson's petition for writ of certiorari. So he wants to get this to a trial. We do. Says Paul Preston is an elector in Sutter County, California, and the president of the New California State Movement. New California State Movement is an unincorporated association. The New California State Movement is a movement to form a new state out of a pre-existing state of California pursuant to the United States Constitution, Article 4, Section 3. And this movement is modeled after the formation and procedure of what is now West Virginia, and expects to stand up as a state in the first quarter of 2023 by submitting a resolution of statehood to the United States Congress. Do you think we might have some attention now? It says neither this attorney, Mr. Preston, nor the New California State Movement has received any money nor any offer of money from anyone to file this proposed amicus brief. I'm really disappointed. I mean, does this make me famous enough to demand money? I didn't know that was the case. Well, I know, and of course it's true. We haven't received anyway, and we wouldn't dare do it anyway. So this is we go into the case now a little bit, and again, very short. Proposed amicus adopts petitioner's statement of the case, specifically including the identities of the defendants, and said defendants were requested to investigate possible voter election fraud that said defendants failed and neglected to do so investigate. So you see, the defendants, Mike Pence included, were supposed to investigate all this stuff. That when we were talking about that with earlier with Andy Biggs, right?
Right.
And the 20 other people. We just get Andy Biggs drops the bombshells, of course, but it's the other 120 people. What about them? Well, they had the same rights. They're complaining. Don't go through with this. Do not do this, Pence. It says the pros amicus states, in addition to the above proposed amicus, through this attorney sent a letter. So Robert Thomas, on behalf of me, sent a letter to who? To Mike Pence. Now listen. Proposed amicus states, in addition to the above, proposed amicus through this attorney sent a letter to defendant Michael R. Pence notifying him of irregularities because of presidential ballots did not comply with California law. So pursuant to California law, could neither be cast nor counted. That advice request was also ignored. Oops. So now he'd been warned that California is flawed too. And that was our lawsuit that we brought at the Superior Court of Sutter County. Listen up now. We brought that to you guys in plenty of time. We could have stopped this whole thing, but no. And you even admitted the court delayed and did not perform its job. We could have stopped this whole thing, but it went on. That's what we're saying. says then Vice President Pence, by ignoring petitioners and amicus warnings, harmed both petitioner, Mr. Preston, and the people comprising the New California State Organization. Thus, the harm is far wider than just the petitioner. It says proposed amicus also agrees with petitioner that the individual rights of all Americans and all citizens of the world, whether their respective governments recognize these rights or not, derived not from the U.S. Constitution, but from the God who made them and motivated the founding fathers to codify some of those rights into the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. Shocking. Points of authorities and arguments. Was there a request by over 100 members of the U.S. Congress to investigate the 2020 presidential election? Proposed amicus. For the purpose of this submission, the petitioner's petition for writ of certiorari, amicus will assume petitioner's statement that respondents were requested to make an investigation. Shocking. It is a true statement. In rescheduling or researching the online record of the Congress acting as the Electoral College, found no reference to any warning or request. Okay, this is quintessential what we're telling them. Listen up. I'm going to read this again. It says, amicus will assume petitioner's statement that respondents were requested to make an investigation is a true statement. In researching the online record of the Congress acting as the Electoral College, found no reference to any warnings or requests. Amicus does not know the proper repository for such request and invites the honorable courts to use vastly superior resources to find such request, whether made orally or in writing. They are not showing us these requests. Pence, the House, are not showing us these requests, and we're calling them out on it. Why? Doesn't this sound familiar for those of you in San Luis Obispo, where they won't they won't allow you to go see things and do things like you normally would do in an audit? And by the way, we had a CPA that was standing in and a couple of other people who know about audits in the audit that was taking place in one of your races up there, because you were going to do a vote count, not a full audit. Yeah, right. Take the cheap shot out, but you didn't allow them to do that. Oh, we can't see that. You can't see that. Whatever you want to do to reconcile, oh, you can't see that. See, this is what they're doing here too. They're not showing us the record, and the record clearly says that Mike Pence was warned. Our letter clearly says that. It is clear, however, that the proper venue to challenge elections for any cause is in Congress on January 6th. It says, going on here, how does an individual petition for the redress of grievances? Petitioners correctly points out two important points. We, the people, have a right to petition our government for a redress of grievances and to hold our government officials appointed or elected to their oath of office. Ding, 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 ding. Those of you that are in office and you haven't, you're getting my drift here, that maybe perhaps you violated your oath of office. We know you have, and we know who you are. The right to petition our government for a redress of grievances is contained in the First Amendment of the Constitution. It states this. Constitution says, this is the U.S. Constitution. Congress shall make no law, the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment says, Constitution shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble. I hate it when this happens, don't you? I think it's hysterical. It says, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Traditionally, a citizen would go to, listen to this, would go to a town hall or other public meeting and express his or her opinion and or desires orally. As our society became more complex and the government at all levels became less responsive, one agreed by government action could use the courts to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's really what started to happen. Those who hear the grievances are bound by an oath to uphold the Constitution.
Sounds like what we've been doing.
Like 190 days worth, right?
195, wasn't it?
190. It says, those who hear the grievances are bound. It says the U.S. Constitution, Article 6, Clause 3 states, we're now into the supremacy clause business. It says the senators and representatives before mentioned and the members of several state legislatures and all executives and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by an oath or affirmation to support this Constitution, but no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. It says, commenting on the Federalist Papers on the requirement that state officers, state judges, and members of the state legislature shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support the Constitution. This is what Alexander Hamilton wrote. It says, thus, the legislatures, courts, and magistrates of the respective members will be incorporated into the operations of the national government as far as its just and constitutional authority extends, and it will be rendered auxiliary to the enforcement of its laws. Oops. I think we have a problem, don't you?
Yep.
It says here, for those bound by the Constitution or by oath, comment treason without force or by arms. It says the broadest meaning of treason is attacking or betraying a governmental authority to which one owes allegiance. The word originally comes from the word or verb tradere, which is a Latin term, which means hand over, and refers to the Christians who handed over fellow Christians over to the Roman authorities. That's how far back this goes. Article 3, Section 3 of the United States Constitution. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on testimony of 2 or more witnesses to the same overt act or on a confession in open court. It says here the wording of the Constitution stops Congress from expanding the definition of treason or lowering the standard of proof for prosecution. It says, but that does not mean the courts have not struggled with the constitutional term treason. It says the struggling U.S. Supreme Court came to the conclusion that one not pick up arms in order to levy war. Now, this is important. This goes back to Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr in U.S. versus Burr, 1807. Any combination to subvert by force the government of the United States, violently or dismember this union, to compel a change in the administration, to coerce the repeal or adoption of a general law, is a conspiracy to levy war. This is what the court said. This is in 1807. It's been around that long. And if the conspiracy be carried into effect by the actual employment of force, by the embodying and assembling of men for the purpose of executing the treasonable design which was previously conceived, it amounts to levying of war. It has been held that that arms are not essential to levying war, provided the force assembled be sufficient to attain ATTAIN, or perhaps to justify attempting the object without them. This paragraph is immediately followed by the reference to the opinion of the Supreme Court. Those only who perform a part who are leagued in the conspiracy are declared to be traitors.
Kid got caught with his hand in the cookie jar.
That's right. It says to complete the definition, both circumstances must occur. They must perform a part which will finish the overt act, and they must be leagued in conspiracy. The person who comes within the description of this opinion of the court levies war. It's called warring against people. Now listen, ladies and gentlemen, this is some pretty important stuff. It means you got a lot of people, about 388 at least, that have violated their oath of office. They have a hearing coming up January 6th, and they may vacate the entire thing. If they vacate the entire thing with the 5 members of the court at that point in time, you can bet all hell is going to break loose in this nation.
And that was the nays, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the yays wanted to preserve the republic, and the
nays did not.
Did not.
That's what it came down to. So those 388 will be gone. And of course, there's going to have to fill some slots. Now, it just so happens we got 5 new Californians going off to Congress next month and 2 senators going off. Uh-oh. Oh, like my daughter used to say, uh-oh, Daddy. I guess you'd have to ask the question, who's your daddy? It's starting to sound like Donald J. Trump is your daddy. Anyway, stay with us. More to come here on Agenda 21 Radio. Remember, stay strong, America. We are exceptional Americans.
Say now you have Pence coming out saying, oh, I shouldn't have certified that.
Well, that's because he was served.
Right. And that's what I'm
okay, so let's kind of get back into this because we have more information on that, and this comes from the Congressional Record, and there's the Congressional Record. I think I did send you a copy.
Yeah,
but the actual this is an abbreviated version, but this is the Congressional Record of guess what date? January 6th, 2021. Shocking. And so to back it up for everybody, the Brunson brothers, Riddell, I guess his name is. He's the one who actually is on the case, but he filed in the Supreme Court. Actually, he got it in the Supreme Court, his case, which was making the 388 members of Congress put on notice that they violated their oaths of office. Not only did they violate their oath of office, but they failed to follow their responsibilities after being warned by 121 members of Congress to let them have the 10-day waiting period to go back to their states and make sure that everything is cleared up. Because Andy Biggs, this might explain a lot, Andy Biggs, the representative from Arizona, there's only 9 representative districts in Arizona, but he was one of them. And it was interesting because he stood up in the well. I think he was the first or second one to stand up and complain that everything in Arizona is out of whack, in terms of the election system.
Which he did his job.
Which he was doing. He was doing his job. In fact, I'm going to read his direct quote here in a second so that we understand that. But he was one of 121 who did that.
See, and I didn't hear about that number.
Well, yeah, that's because everybody's been trying to suppress it. And so what happened is we come along, New California State does, we come along and we file an amicus brief. Now, this is just news for everybody here, but we got this filed in. It was put in actually with the judges yesterday. So we got the confirmation on that. You can check it out on Agenda 21 Radio.news. We have the full documents and everything. You can see everything. You can see what we have here. This is our amicus brief, and you can see the actual, I copied off the actual email response or electronic response from the Supreme Court that shows that our case is in there. And this is from the Supreme Court. This is what we filed this week. Ryland J. Brunson petitioner versus Alma S. Adams et al. Respondents says motion for leave to file amicus brief for Paul Preston and the New California State as amicus curiae in support of petitioner to the Honorable John G. Roberts, Jr., Chief Justice of the United States, and of course Robert E. Thomas III as counsel. And so what we're claiming is that a couple of different things. But first of all, I want to get into a couple of things. Let me read this for the record here. It says Paul Preston, individually as president of the New California State Movement in New California State, respectfully moves for leave of court to file the accompanying amicus curiae brief in support of petitioners Raylan Brunson's petition for writ of certiorari. So what he's doing is he's asked for a judge's hearing. I think it's called a judge's hearing. That's actually, he got it. He actually got it. And that's a whole different story behind the scene, how he actually got that. And for consideration that it be put to trial, but to be actually considered by judges. And of course, this is quite wide reaching, this, his case, because it says that if in fact, the judges confirm and they go along with what the petitioner wants, which is Brunson, that you will see 388 members of Congress, Mike Pence, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris all have to leave Washington immediately because their positions will be vacated. Now, that's a big problem. That also means that these 388 people have committed crimes because they have not upheld their oath of office. But there's more to it. And there's more to it. And that's what we brought in. We're bringing not only this petition, then I'll read this in a second, some of it that's really important, but there's history in play here, big time, that has been not noted necessarily for the record about treason and how do you get treason? You know, what is treason? And the perception of treason. See, the perception of treason up until 1807 was that treason is when people organize an army, and the army then takes action and starts shooting and killing and doing mayhem. And then of course, you're being treasonous to the government or some value like that. It's basically it's where you got also the term two or more. Right. If you have two or more people that are conspiring, and it ultimately takes to action and starts killing people in a warfare or something, that's treasonous.
Right.
And of course, nobody ever thought that would not be the case. That, in other words, they never thought that what happens if you try and stop a presidential election, you might not be using guns and violence, but you're using something different. You're using the persuasion to commit treason against your own country. You're warring against your own country, right, in a different fashion without the so-called weapons. Weapons of words become valuable. And that's what they're talking about here. And that's what the value of the Burr thing is. So when we come back, we'll talk more about this, because this is happening right here in little old Marysville, Yuba City counties, Sutter and Yuba. It's amazing. Stay with us. You're listening to Agenda 21 Radio.